They got Little Durk in a hole for basically some BS. And right now we're gonna show the paper.
I know for a fact that's not the end of his story. Right. He coming from under that shit.
They said he was free. The clips were everywhere. Phones lit up, timelines exploded, comment sections filled with fire emojis and celebration posts. He coming home, smirk back. They couldn't hold him. For a few hours, it felt like the system had cracked, and one of rap's biggest names had walked out those doors. But here's the truth. He never left federal custody. What actually happened was something much smaller and much more complicated. Lil Durk wasn't released from jail. He wasn't granted bond. He didn't beat the case. What changed was that after spending over 4 brutal months in solitary confinement, he was moved back into general population. That's it. No freedom, no courtroom victory, just a shift from isolation to interaction. And somehow, that small move turned into a viral moment that had the entire internet celebrating like it was a homecoming parade. So how did moved out of solitary become he's free? Why were fans convinced something major had happened? And what does this really mean for a case where life in prison is still on the table? Because the real story isn't about release, it's about survival. And it starts months before that viral clip ever hit your feed, before the solitary confinement, before the viral confusion, before fans started celebrating too early. There was an airport. October 24th, 2024. U.S. Marshals arrested Lil Durk in Broward County, Florida, near Miami International Airport. No warning, no slow buildup, just cuffs and federal charges. The day before that arrest, 5 members connected to his Only the Family circle had already been indicted. Within 24 hours, his name was added to the center of it all. And this wasn't a minor charge. Federal prosecutors accused him of orchestrating a murder-for-hire plot tied to a 2022 shooting in Los Angeles that left 1 man dead. The alleged target survived. His cousin did not. That's when everything changed. He was extradited to Los Angeles. On November 15, 2024, he stood in federal court and pleaded not guilty. The judge ordered detention without bond. From that moment forward, he wasn't fighting rumors. He was fighting a potential life sentence. This wasn't state court. This wasn't a quick plea situation. This was federal. And in federal court, when they indict you, conviction rates are high, extremely high. Prosecutors don't move unless they believe they have structure, paperwork, timelines, cooperation, and leverage. Every bond hearing after that? Denied. December 2024? Denied. May 2025? Denied. June 2025? Denied again. Prosecutors argued flight risk. They pointed to international flight bookings. They mentioned alleged attempts to leave the country. The word Dubai became part of the narrative. The judge wasn't convinced by the defense's explanations. Each time, the answer was the same: no. And as the case built pressure on the outside, something even heavier was about to happen on the inside. Because jail is one thing, solitary confinement is something else entirely. And that's where this story turns. Jail is one thing. Solitary is another universe. In August 2025, everything inside changed. Lil Durk was placed in the Special Housing Unit, the SHU. That's what federal facilities call it. But inmates call it something else: the hole. Reports say the placement came after he was allegedly found with an unauthorized Apple Watch. In federal custody, even something small can trigger serious consequences. And this wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was isolation. For 131 days, more than 4 months, he sat in a cell separated from general population. No regular phone access, no in-person visits, no casual interaction, 1 phone call per month. Think about that. 1 call every 30 days, no studio, no team meetings, no daily check-ins with family. Just walls. Solitary confinement in federal detention isn't just about being alone. It's controlled movement, limited sunlight, meals through a slot, minimal human contact. Days blend together, time stretches. The silence gets loud. And this wasn't a week. It wasn't 2 weeks. It was 131 days. For fans watching from the outside, updates slowed. His voice disappeared. Communication nearly stopped. Rumors started filling the gaps. Some said he was being targeted. Others said the system was trying to break him. Nobody had clear answers. What made it worse? Every bond denial had already piled on pressure. Now he was fighting a life case, alone. Solitary confinement doesn't just isolate the body, It tests the mind. It changes rhythm. It forces patience. And for months, that's where he stayed. But then something shifted, because January was coming, and with it, a legal move that would quietly change everything. After 131 days in isolation, something finally moved. January 6th, 2026. Lil Durk's legal team filed a motion challenging the extended solitary confinement. They argued that the length of his time in the SHU raised serious concerns under federal detention regulations. Isolation is supposed to be temporary, short-term, controlled. 4 months? That's different. The motion didn't scream, it didn't go viral, it was paperwork, quiet, strategic, but it was the first direct pushback against the conditions inside the jail itself. A review hearing followed almost immediately. And then, mid-January, the shift happened. Durk was moved out of solitary confinement and placed back into general population. No press conference, no dramatic announcement, no courtroom applause, just a change in housing status. But inside federal, that's a major difference. General population means movement. It means regular phone privileges. It means access to visits again. It means being around other people instead of sitting in isolation for 23 hours a day. His lawyer later described it perfectly. A small but meaningful step. Small because he was still locked up. Meaningful because solitary can break people. The February 9th hearing that was scheduled to further address the SHU issue, canceled. Why? Because he was already out of it. The problem, legally speaking, had been resolved. And that's when things got loud, because the moment word spread that he was out of solitary, the internet misunderstood it completely. And what happened next is what turned a quiet, internal shift into a full-blown viral storm. The second people heard he was out, the internet ran with it. Clips started flying across timelines. Short captions, big reactions. He's free, had to let him go. Smirk back outside. The energy felt like a homecoming celebration, but nobody stopped to ask one question. Out of what? He wasn't released from federal custody. He wasn't granted bond. He didn't beat the case. He was moved from solitary confinement back into general population inside the same detention center. That distinction disappeared online. Influencers grabbed half the headline. Blogs rushed to post. Fan pages celebrated like the trial had already happened and the verdict was in. Even people who normally follow court documents closely got caught in the excitement. Because perception moves faster than paperwork. And when someone spends 131 days in isolation, the moment they're moved out feels like daylight. It feels like progress. It feels like a win. For fans who had been watching bond denials stack up and updates slow down, any positive movement felt enormous. But here's the reality. He was still in the Metropolitan Detention Center, still without bond, still facing life in federal court. The only thing that changed was the housing unit. Yet that small change turned into a viral moment that made it seem like something dramatic had happened. And in a way, something did happen, just not the way the internet thought. Because getting out of solitary isn't freedom, but it can feel like survival. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't small either. When someone spends over 4 months in isolation, the return to general population changes everything about daily life. Not the case, not the charges, not the bond status, but the rhythm. In solitary, movement is restricted. Phone calls are limited. Legal strategy becomes harder. Even basic human interaction disappears. Time slows down in a way most people can't imagine. Back in general population, that pressure eases. Regular phone access returns. Legal conversations become easier. Visits can resume. Information flows again. That matters in a federal case where over 30,000 pages of discovery are involved. Preparation requires communication. Strategy requires clarity. Isolation makes both difficult. His legal team called it a small but meaningful step. Small because he's still detained. Meaningful because being able to speak regularly with family and attorneys changes mental endurance. Solitary confinement isn't just about punishment. It tests stability, it forces stillness, it amplifies uncertainty. For someone fighting a life case, mental clarity becomes as important as legal strategy. So while fans online misunderstood it as release, inside those walls, it was something real. It meant he could prepare differently, think differently, fight differently, because now the real battle is coming. And that battle isn't about jail housing. It's about the charges that could decide the rest of his life. This isn't a probation case. It isn't a do a few years and come home situation. What Lil Durk is facing in federal court is what his own attorney described as a binary outcome case, meaning there are only two possible endings: freedom. Federal prosecutors charged him conspiracy to commit murder for hire, using interstate facilities to commit murder for hire resulting in death, using, carrying, and discharging firearms in furtherance of a crime of violence resulting in death. If convicted on all counts, he could spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The death penalty is not being sought, but life without parole in the federal system is exactly what it sounds like. No state plea bargain shortcuts, no easy time cuts, no quick comeback narrative. His attorney made it, this is not state court. In state cases, you sometimes see negotiated outcomes: 10 years, 15 years, reductions. Federal cases don't operate that way, especially when someone died. This case centers around a 2022 shooting in Los Angeles. Prosecutors allege it was retaliation tied to earlier violence. They claim travel records, financial links, and communications connect the operation back to him. The alleged target survived. His cousin did not. That's the weight hanging over everything. That's why bond has been denied repeatedly. That's why solitary mattered. That's why the April 2026 trial date feels so heavy. Because this isn't about image anymore. It's about whether a federal jury believes the government's story or the defense's. And in federal court, that difference is massive. Because the system he's facing now is not built like the one people are used to seeing in headlines. It's built differently, and that difference could decide everything. Most people hear court case and picture what they've seen in state trials: quick hearings, negotiated pleas, witnesses folding under pressure. Surprise moments? Federal court doesn't work like that. His attorney described the difference in simple terms. State cases are like middle school basketball. Federal cases are like the NBA finals. Everything is tighter, more structured, more prepared. In federal prosecutions, conviction rates are extremely high. The government does not move forward unless they believe they have layers of evidence stacked in place. Travel logs, phone data, financial trails, grand jury testimony, cooperation. And that cooperation piece is important. In the federal system, when someone cooperates, they are locked in. They sit through multiple interviews. They testify before a grand jury. If they change their story later, they risk perjury charges on top of their original sentence. That creates pressure to stay consistent. This isn't like some high-profile state case where a witness gets on the stand and suddenly flips. Federal cooperators usually arrive prepared. That's part of what makes this dangerous territory. On top of that, discovery in this case reportedly exceeds 30,000 pages. That's thousands of documents, communications, financial records, and technical data. Federal prosecutors build cases slowly, and when they do, they build them thick. And then there's the timeline. Arrest in October 2024. Multiple bond denials. Trial pushed several times. Now set for April 2026. Federal cases stretch, they don't rush. Which means this isn't about internet momentum. It's about courtroom structure. And one of the most controversial battles in that courtroom isn't about travel or testimony. It's about music. Because prosecutors want to use his lyrics. And that fight could shape everything. Now here's where the case takes a turn most people didn't expect. It's not just about travel records. It's not just about phone logs. It's about music. Federal prosecutors have pushed to use Lil Durk's lyrics and music videos as evidence. They argue that certain lines show motive, intent, or mindset connected to the charges. That move instantly sparked backlash. Because rap lyrics being used in court isn't new, but it's controversial every single time. On February 9, 2026, the judge made a split decision. Specific lyrics from the song "Hanging with Wolves" were barred from evidence. Prosecutors wanted to use a line referencing hopping on a flight. The judge ruled that lyric related more to alleged flight risk, not to the core murder for hire charges. So those lines were excluded. But not everything was blocked. Other songs and videos are still under consideration, which means parts of his artistic catalog could still end up in front of a jury. His attorney has argued strongly against this tactic, saying rap is storytelling, not confession. He pointed out that no other genre gets dissected this way. Nobody pulls lines from action movies and treats them as literal admissions. The defense even challenged one specific track prosecutors tied to the case. According to his legal team, Durk recorded his verse 7 months before the shooting prosecutors claim it references. 7 months before. If that timeline holds, the argument that the song celebrated the incident falls apart. But this fight isn't just about one lyric. It's about whether creative expression becomes courtroom evidence. And depending on what gets admitted before trial, the tone of the entire case could shift. Because juries react to emotion. And music carries emotion, which means this pre-trial battle might matter more than people realize. Every time his legal team has asked for bond, the government circles back to the same claim: flight risk. Prosecutors say when he was arrested in October 2024 near Miami International Airport, he was preparing to leave the country. They've pointed to international flight bookings, destinations like Dubai and Switzerland, as proof he was planning to run. That argument has stuck, because in federal court, if the judge believes there's even a serious possibility someone might flee, bond gets denied. But the defense tells a very different story. His attorney revealed that when they reviewed the full flight itineraries, every booking ended in Dubai, not random halfway stops like Rome, which prosecutors highlighted early on. And then there's another detail that changes the tone completely. The flights were booked in economy class, middle seats, back rows. The defense's argument is simple. A wealthy, internationally known artist isn't trying to escape federal prosecution by squeezing into row 52 on a commercial flight for 17 hours. They even claimed that after presenting complete documentation, a federal probation officer reviewed everything and concluded he was not a flight risk. The court still denied bond, and the bond package offered wasn't small: $1 million in cash, hundreds of thousands in real estate, around-the-clock armed security, electronic monitoring. Still denied. So the question isn't whether they tried, it's whether the judge believes the government's narrative more than the defense's. And as long as that flight risk label sticks, freedom before trial stays out of reach. Which means the next real turning point isn't bond. It's the trial itself. The trial was supposed to happen much sooner. First it was January 2025, then October 2025, then January 2026. Now it's scheduled for April 24th, 2026, with a possible backup date in early May. The delay has had the same explanation: the size of the case, over 30,000 pages of discovery, multiple co-defendants, pretrial motions, evidence disputes. When a federal case gets this large, preparation alone takes months. But delays create pressure, because while lawyers prepare, he waits, still in custody, still without bond, still facing life if convicted. And here's what surprised a lot of people. Reports say Durk himself objected to at least one postponement. He reportedly wants the trial sooner, not later. That detail matters. Someone trying to run from a case doesn't push for a faster courtroom date. Someone confident in their defense does. Meanwhile, every pretrial ruling reshapes the battlefield. What lyrics get admitted, what testimony stands, what evidence jurors are allowed to see. Those decisions happen before a single juror is seated, and they can quietly decide momentum. Outside the courtroom, the internet talks daily. Inside the courtroom, strategy moves slowly. And in federal court, slow doesn't mean weak. It means calculated. The question now isn't about solitary, it isn't about viral confusion. It's about what happens when 12 jurors hear everything. Because when April arrives, narrative won't matter. Evidence will. Strip away the headlines, and this situation comes down to one simple reality. He is not free, he is not home, he is not cleared. Lil Durk is still sitting inside federal custody, preparing for a trial that could decide whether he walks out or never. The solitary release it felt like movement. It felt like something was shifting in his. And mentally, it was important. Getting out of isolation matters. Being able to call family regularly matters. Being able to speak to lawyers without severe restriction matters. But legally, nothing about the core case changed. The charges remain. The bond remains denied. The trial date remains set. And federal court doesn't move on emotion. What makes this moment heavy is the gap between public perception and legal. Online, people celebrate every small development like it's a victory lap. In the courtroom, victories are measured differently. The defense believes the evidence will not hold up. They are challenging the use of lyrics. They are challenging the narrative around flight risk. They are preparing to confront cooperating witnesses. They are pushing back at every turn. The prosecution believes the case is strong. They have built it slowly. They are confident enough to take it to trial instead of negotiating. Now everything leads to April 2026. No more viral confusion, no more half headlines. Just 12 jurors, thousands of pages of evidence, and one question that will define the rest of. That's where this story is really headed. For a moment, it looked like everything changed. Clips spread, headlines flew, people celebrated like he had walked through the front gates and into daylight. But the truth was quieter. Lil Durk didn't go home. He didn't beat the case. He didn't get bond. He got moved out of solitary and yet, that small shift felt because after 131 days in isolation, being able to make regular phone calls again feels like air. Being able to speak freely with your legal team feels like momentum. Being able to see other human beings feels like life returning. It wasn't freedom, but it was. In a federal case where the stakes are life imprisonment, even minor progress carries emotion. Fans saw movement and translated it into victory. Reality is more complicated. The charges remain. The trial date stands. The outcome is still unknown. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It wasn't the end of the story. It wasn't even the turning point. It was a reminder that in long legal battles, sometimes the smallest win feels like freedom, especially when you've been sitting in the dark. Now, the real test isn't about housing status. It's about what happens when the courtroom doors finally